It is a pleasure to be here to share on self-esteem, a link to decreasing anxiety. And I'm so glad that you participated in the poll because I did not receive any formal training on self-esteem, but I have been learning and just teaching myself more about it. It really is a subject that intrigues me. And then I noticed that a lot of my clients, they have been really struggling with self-esteem. So the more I learned about myself, and it has really made me a better clinician. And then it really is dear to my heart because I see just about all of my clients struggling with low self-esteem. So I'm able to give them some interventions, some teaching, some insight to help them just as a person. We know that self-esteem is foundational to every human being. And so it really has enhanced my practice and also enhanced the lives of my clients. So I just want to encourage you that as you listen, just be open. A lot of the information that I'm going to share, it's not new information. We've seen it and we've heard it, but putting it all together and presenting it and packaging it with increasing someone's self-esteem and using that as a tool to help decrease anxiety or depression, that may be a little new to you. I also want to just encourage you too that none of us are perfect, but we are change agents. And so as we learn about self-esteem, one thing that I really learned about myself is that I've learned to appreciate my skills, my weaknesses, and my strengths. And so my clients are not expecting me to be perfect. They just want me to be authentic and real. And so that is what we can give to our clients and provide the support that they need along this journey as they heal mentally, physically, and even medically. So, what is self esteem? Self esteem is not your identity, although it does have something to do with that. It's related. It is not self appreciation. It is not self confidence. It is not pride, although those are all related. What is self esteem? That is the big question. Self esteem is a realistic, accurate, and honest opinion of yourself. It's an appreciative opinion of oneself. And that's by Dr. Glenn Schiraldi. He is the author of the self esteem workbook that I've been using to enhance my practice and also to enhance myself as a person. So, there are three components to self esteem. So, think of them as building blocks. Worth is your foundation, and then you have love, and then you have growth. And it takes all three of those to really have a good, healthy self esteem. So let's look at Howard's laws of human worth. It says that all have infinite, internal, eternal, and unconditional worth as persons. All have equal worth as people. Externals neither add to nor diminish worth. Worth is stable and never in jeopardy. Even if someone rejects you, worth doesn't have to be earned or proved. It already exists. I don't know about you, but when I first read those laws, it really was freeing to me to know that I don't have to prove myself. That's not what worth is. And worth is something that is given to us. It is something that you cannot diminish. It's not up for negotiation. Even if the person themselves doesn't believe in their worth, it doesn't negate the fact that they have worth. A lot of times, as human beings, the way we choose to experience our worth, now that is really the deciding factor. So I can choose to experience my worth as feeling less than because of maybe trauma or situations that I found myself in that are not favorable, or I can choose to live my worth knowing that I am just as good as anyone else. Now, all have equal worth as people. So when we say that, sometimes people say, well, that person's better at me at playing football or running track. That just means that they may be better than you at a particular sport, but that has nothing to do with your worth as a person. That is something that cannot be compared and it cannot be competed against. Also, the externals, going back to number three, externals neither add to nor diminish worth. There's a difference between worth and value. Our value can go up and down at any given moment based on what job you have, how much money you make, what type of car you drive. I mean, there are a lot of variables, but that is separate from your worth. Worth is on a continuum from the time that you're born until the time that you die. Worth never changes. So the second building block is unconditional love. This is what it looks like. Unconditional love is loving myself, a healthy self-love, regardless of my flaws or my weaknesses. It also allows me to know that, you know what, I may feel uncomfortable being a beginner at any particular task or item, but that's okay. Learning to enjoy and be okay with not knowing everything and knowing that there's some things that I have to learn. Growth, just allowing yourself to be you and to know that you're going to grow. Just like with this presentation, everything that I'm sharing with you are things that I've had to learn and read about, and it has helped me to grow as a person. So just know that self-esteem, once no one really ever arrives, you may get to a certain point, but there's still always room for growth. Even on any given day, your self-esteem may go up or down based on what you're thinking and how you're feeling. But it doesn't mean that you don't have self-esteem. It just means that it's always changing. It's something that we always have to be aware of and evaluate and just know that, okay, there's room for growth. So why study self-esteem? We can look at self-esteem as being a symptom or as a root cause. Self-esteem is known as the invisible handicap because you don't know all the time if someone has self-esteem. You know by their actions or by what they may say, but just to look at someone, you can't tell who's suffering from self-esteem, low self-esteem or not. So if we look at it as a symptom, if someone has depression or anxiety, that may affect their self-esteem. But typically what I'm finding in my practice is that people have been dealing with low self-esteem for quite a while. And self-esteem is foundational to every human being. So if you continue to experience low self-esteem, it really filters throughout your life and it affects every area of your life. So when you look at people who have depression, anxiety, fear, a lot of times the root cause is low self-esteem. And it's because there's been some trauma or some misunderstanding or some hurt where people have internalized those experiences. And so instead of learning from those experiences and how they could make that experience make them better, they internalized it. And so that experience became who they were. So let me give you an example. If I'm a painter and someone doesn't like my painting, what I should take away from that is, okay, they just didn't like my painting. Everyone's not going to like my painting, but it doesn't mean that I'm not a good painter. I could walk away from that experience saying I must be no good. I might as well stop painting. So do you see the difference? One is just allowing external people, external situations to be exactly what they are. They have an opinion, that's okay. But it doesn't have to define who you are. It doesn't have to taint you as a person down to the core and then change how you express yourself. So there are 3 self-esteem scales. So we all know that if you're in private practice or if you're practicing with any agency, we are not reimbursed or paid for self-esteem measurements, but it is something that is good to know that there are 3 scales out there. Sometimes I use these scales in my practice and sometimes I don't. Most people know that they have self-esteem, and so we just start there. But there are some of my clients, like I had someone yesterday, she loves to receive homework. So she likes the scales. She enjoys filling them out and taking the self-inventory. So it does help some of our clients to conceptualize exactly what self-esteem is, what low self-esteem is, because sometimes we can see it in other people, but we can't see it in ourselves. So the 3 self-esteem scales are, one is by Rosenberg, that's 10 questions. Cooper Smith self-esteem inventory, that is 50 questions. And then there's a self-esteem checkup. I have found them to be all pretty user-friendly. I think I prefer the self-esteem checkup. It's more brief and to the point. Now let's discuss the power of thoughts, because our thoughts really do drive our life. And when I say that, I mean that anywhere between 75% and 98% of the physical problems that people have, medical conditions, and mental disorders come as a result of their thought life. And that quote comes from Dr. Caroline Leaf. She's a neuroscientist. So let me illustrate this for you. So we all know that our brain is under our skull in our head, but our mind is our power of choice. It's our ability to choose, to think, and to imagine and reason, and a lot of other things. So I'm going to hold my hand here next to my head just to kind of illustrate this is where my mind is, if you will, just for the sake of the illustration. So at any given moment, we are bombarded by a lot of perceptions of thought that come to us. Now, whether we capture that thought and put energy toward it and start thinking about it is, another issue. So we do have the power of choice. Some people feel like I don't have a choice. I can't control my thinking. Well, you can't control the perceptions of thought coming to you, but you can decide whether you choose to put energy toward that or not. And a lot of people feel guilty when the thought merely comes into their awareness. They feel really bad that it's even in their awareness, and they think, well, maybe I'm thinking that. No, you're not thinking that unless you start thinking it a second time, a third time. Now you're putting energy toward it. And then the more you think about it, and then you may start speaking about it. Okay, so now you're starting to create memory. So what we think about, what we choose to think about, and what we speak about, that all becomes recorded into our brain. So it goes from our mind into our brain. The mind is the substrate of the brain. And so when those thoughts are, when those perceptions become our thoughts and we own them, now within our brain, we are creating memory all the way down to the DNA cellular level. It expresses the way our genes, it changes the way our genes express themselves. So if I'm thinking a lot of negative thoughts and I'm ruminating that like all the time, those thoughts are chemical properties that become memory, and it affects the neurotransmitters, your hormones, especially if it's fear-based or stressful. It's now engaging your cortisol levels. There's excess cortisol being released in your body, adrenaline, and now you're having inflammation. So you can see how our thoughts are so powerful. And so over time, people do manifest medical conditions because of their thought process. So the converse is true with positive thoughts or thoughts about love. That can also have a very beneficial effect to the body. So just wanted to let you know that that is very powerful. One more point I will add too is that, for example, those people who have diabetes, I'm not saying everybody is in this category, but it started with a thought somewhere. Maybe they were depressed, something happened, and they kept ruminating about that. Now they have become like a closet eater or an emotional eater, and they just kind of eat a lot of different things. Over time, not regulating your thoughts and not regulating the types of food you eat, it does manifest. So you can see how the mind-body brain connection is so real. So now let's look at some evidence-based interventions. So this is going to be the fun part. These are thought distortions, and I have included several attachments for everyone attending today, so you'll get those later on. But look at all of these here. Some of them I will read the definitions for, and some of them I won't, because some of them are just pretty straightforward. Like all or nothing thinking means that there's no gray area. It's either black or white. Jumping to conclusions. There's also mental filtering. So what I want to do or have you do is that as I'm going through, if any of these resonate with you, if you can relate to them, or if you have a lot of clients who tend to display some of these thought distortions, go ahead and type that in the chat. I would love to see what you have to say and get feedback. Now, mental filtering is focusing exclusively on certain, usually negative or upsetting aspects of something while ignoring the rest. You filter out positive details and hyper focus on one single negative detail. So you also have overgeneralization, and that is taking isolated cases and using them to make wide generalizations. So an example of that is, I didn't pass my English test, so I'm probably not going to pass my math test either. Well, that's not logical. Just because you didn't pass the English test doesn't mean that you won't pass the math test. I mean, maybe, maybe not, but it's an overgeneralization. Disqualifying the positive. Positive experiences that conflict with the individual's negative views are discounted. So let me give you an example of that. Although she told me that I did a great job, I didn't really believe her because I always perform poorly. Also, mind reading, uh, catastrophizing, fortune telling, personalization, blame or attribution. So some people take the blame no matter what has happened. They always feel like they're to blame, even if it's not their fault or the other person is 100%, culpable. They still take that blame. Also, should, must, and ought statements. So you have to be aware of those, like, I should have done that, or I must always do this. Sometimes it's not always that you have to do something. You may have a desire to do something. It may be a want, but to put that pressure on yourself to say it's got to be this way, that is distorted, and it usually is fear-based. Also, emotional reasoning, and that is making decisions and arguments based on how you feel rather than on objective reality. And also minimization. Really just positive characteristics or experiences are treated as real but insignificant. So an example of that would be, I was given an award for mentoring young people by the mayor. It's not really that big of a deal. I'm not that special. Anyone could have mentored them. So you see the distortions. And so what I do is I like to help clients identify the different thought distortions that they have and just look at where they're coming from. And then I help them to rephrase or to reframe that thought or that phrase or statement that they made so that it's no longer in the distortion area, and it's logical and it's reasonable, and they appreciate that. A lot of you may recognize this from CBT training, cognitive behavioral therapy, where we look at the thought distortions. So I just wanted to share that with you. So let's get back to worth. So with the evidence-based interventions, the replacing the negative self-defeating thoughts, the thought distortions that we just looked at, that would be an evidence-based intervention that would help to build someone's worth and to help them to become more aware of the internal dialogue of how they're thinking about themselves, what they're saying. And I did say dialogue. Some people say monologue. I say dialogue because many times who we are authentically, because of trauma or experiences or what have you, we have stopped expressing ourselves and being our true selves. And then we've become someone that we really don't recognize. We become someone based on what other people say we are, how other people define us, or how we define ourselves based on how we think people are perceiving us. And so we become someone that we really aren't. And so who I am and who I become, they conflict. And there's that tug of war. So helping people to really identify that struggle and to change what they're feeding their core self. And that gets over to the automatic thoughts, what we're talking about. But the automatic thoughts, when you really dissect them, they lead to core beliefs like, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm unlovable. Those are some examples. So this intervention helps to increase awareness. The second intervention is creating the habit of affirming oneself with affirmations. This is one of my favorite interventions because it allows us or our clients to feed our core what it needs to grow. I call this non-invasive brain surgery. And thanks to neuroplasticity in the brain, we are able to change and adapt to new beliefs and create new memories so we can undo the hardwire that is not beneficial and redo it. Now, you're not going to forget about the memory. I mean, you'll still remember, but you're going to develop well, it's going to be a paradigm shift. It's like a mental shift so that you'll learn how to think differently and create a new way of thinking and perceiving yourself and a new way of speaking, right? Because what we think, what we speak, it creates our reality. So if we have a reality that is less than pleasing, then we have to look at what are we thinking and what are we speaking on a daily basis. The next building block is love. So that's the one that's in the middle. So the intervention here is the mirror intervention. Now, I know this has been around for like a long time, but I find that over 60% of my clients, they cannot look at themselves in the mirror. Many of them have been invisible to themselves for quite some time. I even had one of my clients say, after I challenged her to look at herself in the mirror, which was very painful, but she did it for just a few seconds. She said she couldn't believe how much she had aged. She didn't even recognize herself. So, I mean, this is someone that's like, has a bathroom with a mirror in it, but she's not looking at herself. I mean, she sees the image, but she's not focusing and being aware of who she really is. So, this intervention allows clients to really accept themselves and have appreciation for their being as a human being and also for their physical body, for the imperfections that they may have and all of that. So it really teaches them mindfulness. So I challenge my clients to just maybe have a brief encounter. Don't make a special trip to the bathroom, but just when you're in the bathroom taking care of business, just look in the mirror. Some of them can do it for 1 second, some can do it for 5 minutes, but really just building that awareness. Once they can get to the place where they feel comfortable looking in the mirror, then I challenge them to get really close on that mirror and look deep within their eyes to connect with themselves because they have been detached for quite some time. So to really make that connection, I had one client, she just started pouring out tears. I mean, the hurt that she has endured, she has not been able to really look at herself. She hasn't been self-compassionate. She hasn't acknowledged the pain. She hasn't really done anything. She just went throughout life on a daily basis, just holding it. But she cares for everybody around her. She shows love. She's kind. I mean, she's like the perfect friend, but she's not there for herself. So I challenge clients to show up for yourself. And this is one intervention that really helps to build self-love. And it takes some time, but it can be done. Another intervention that helps to increase self-love is meeting our pain with self-compassion. And this teaches clients how to reframe what they think about themselves, how they perceive themselves. So let me give you a couple of examples. I asked one of my clients, and these are all found in the workbook by Dr. Shiraldi. I asked one of my clients, if you saw a homeless person on the street, what would you think about that person? And then what action would you take? And of course, that person said, they would feel their heart would go out to that person, and then they would try to see what they could do to help them. And so after she completed her sentence, I said, okay, now what if that homeless person was you? What would you do? What would you think? What would you do? And it was like the cat had her tongue. She could not say anything. And what she did say was negative. She said, well, it's my fault that I'm in that situation. I shouldn't be in that situation. So it's just amazing how we can, see everyone else, but we can't see ourselves. And the same love that we extend to someone else, we can't extend it to ourselves. So this is something that really is dear to my heart. My heart just, well, I won't say my heart breaks, but my heart goes out to my clients when I see people right in front of me saying some of these things. And so it really challenges me to be the best clinician that I can become and be so that I can help them through. And a lot of them are doing well. Those that choose to follow the interventions and that choose to come to the sessions, they're doing well. With the love, uh, oh, I'm sorry, did I go backwards? I went backwards. So this brings me to my next slide. Grow, grow, grow. I had this question a few weeks ago. And the question that I asked myself is the DNA that a caterpillar has, is it the same DNA that the butterfly has after the metamorphosis stage? And I don't know if you want to type this into the chat, but what do you think? Do you think the DNA would be the same, or do you think it would change post metamorphosis? Well, surprisingly, to my to my surprise, the DNA is still the same. It doesn't change. So what happens is the caterpillar goes into this mode where it has such a voracious appetite. It eats everything or all the leaves in sight. And so that huge appetite activates the hormones within itself to switch on or turn on the metamorphosis process. And so as that caterpillar is eating, 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 it's feeding itself. One thing that I do tell my clients, I'm just going to kind of use this as a parallel. I know that we're not caterpillars or butterflies, but this is one of the best ways that I can illustrate to my clients. And because our brain thinks in terms of pictures. And so when I give them a picture or something to think about, they're able to grasp the information, and then we're able to transfer that information to them or to us so that we can have the revelation that we need to get, or the insight to get from that particular illustration. So let me get back. I'm sorry, I interrupted myself. So as the caterpillar is feeding itself, it sheds a layer of its, well, the outer layer, and then whatever is left is absorbed by the caterpillar and it's recycled. So if the legs were, shed, then the legs are reused, anything, and it may become a speck on the wing, or it may become some other part of the butterfly. So I always tell my clients, no experience is ever wasted. Even traumatic experiences that we don't really want to think about, if we allow ourselves to grow, which means we're going to feed ourselves with the affirmations, we're going to start paying attention to the thought distortions and challenging them. What I have found is that the caterpillar is able, the person is able to grow, and the caterpillar definitely grows. So what I teach my clients is that during this process of when you are affirming yourself and you're feeding yourself to the core, you've got to be protective. And I don't mean protective in a defensive way, but we have to establish healthy boundaries. And we have to establish those boundaries because if we don't have boundaries, it's almost like having a house that is just wide open. The doors are wide open, the windows are open, there's no lock, and we just let people just run around, or let ourselves just run around rampant. So we have to have boundaries for our time, boundaries for our bodies, boundaries for our lives. And I help them work on those boundaries because it takes time, and it's not being selfish, but you've got to now start investing in yourself. If you've been investing in everyone else, but not yourself, now it's time for you. And so when you invest in yourself, you are now a better version of yourself, and you can really even have more of an impact on the people around you. So we talk about healthy boundaries. Also, during the stage when the caterpillar is, going into the metamorphosis stage and they're in the chrysalis, I also compare that to, you've got to have assertive communication. We have to let people know what they're doing to us or what is happening around us. We have to let them know how it is making us feel when they do X, Y, and Z in a certain situation. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. I really feel annoyed when you come home and just throw your socks in the living room. I would appreciate it if when you come home from work, you would put your socks in the hamper. So I was very direct, I was firm, but I was pleasant. I was not aggressive, but I wasn't passive. So just learning to advocate for yourself and to let people know what you need or what they're doing, how it makes you feel. So instead of saying you, I am taking the onus and I am telling you how it makes me feel. And so that usually opens up the door for communications. But in this instance, the assertive communication really helps my clients to see that a lot of times their anxiety or depression stems from the fact that they won't tell people no. They won't say no to a certain situation, or they won't put parameters, and they'll just let people define or let people make requests. And instead of thinking about, well, how is this going to impact my time? How is it going to impact me? They just do it, even if it puts their life in jeopardy or their mental health at jeopardy. So I just wanted to share that with you. So when the caterpillar comes out of that stage and it becomes this beautiful butterfly, which is what I hope a lot of our clients will do, they realize that I have the same DNA, but now instead of crawling, I can fly. Instead of being limited by where I can travel or what I can see, now I can soar and travel up to 2,500 miles. So really cultivating ourselves, cultivating our minds, and learning to eat the right foods, exercise, get the proper rest. We talk about all of this. This is a holistic approach to self esteem. And it's really so important that we share this because when you think about the food that we eat, over 90% of the serotonin is made in the gut. Definitely it's made in the brain, but a lot of it is made in the gut. So if you don't have, a healthy diet, it's going to affect your mood. And you may be depressed because of what you're thinking for sure, but also because of what you're eating. So you see this mind-brain connection is so real. And so I encourage all of my clients that, yes, it may seem daunting when we first start, but if you trust me, because I know this information and this material works, you can grow, grow, and grow. Okay, Dwayne, I'm watching my time here. All right, breaking cycles. So this leads us to breaking cycles. So with the first part of the presentation, talking about self-esteem, this has helped my clients to really have the foundation that they need so that they can gain the insights. And they're also learning a lot of valuable tools that we discussed with the evidence-based interventions that now help us with decreasing anxiety. And a lot of times within the first two visits, after discussing self-esteem, healthy boundaries, assertive communications, I have seen where 50% of the anxiety that they experience decreases. It's all in just teaching our clients that they do have choices. A lot of times they think they don't have a choice. They think, well, this is my lot in life and I just have to deal with it. No, you don't have to deal with it. And there's a way to talk to people. There's a way to advocate for yourself. And I teach that to them. So now let's look at breaking cycles. So this is by Dr. Judson. And I told you that our brain thinks in terms of pictures and not so much in words, although what we think and say does create memory. So I like this particular illustration and also this way of unwinding anxiety because it shows the three circles and you can see that it's like a cycle. So it helps my clients to picture, okay, what is going on? Because usually when you have a cycle in motion, underneath that cycle is the root cause or something that is being hidden from the cycle. So we're looking at triggers in the first box at the lower left. Is it a thought, an emotion, or a smell that is setting that person off? And then at the top, the behavior. Describe what you want to change. So what is the behavioral response that you're having to the trigger? And then the result. So you have to ask yourself, what do I get from this? Like, what is the benefit? What is the outcome? So let me give you an example, a couple of examples of some topics that have come up in therapy. So I have a client who I saw last week, and he was telling me about the fact that he doesn't have a lot of friends, he has a lot of fragmented relationships. And he says that I know that I cut them off. Like I have very little tolerance. And so I asked him, I said, well, usually there's some type of cycle that may have started in childhood or at any point in your life that you're still playing out to this day. And so he thought really hard. And he remembered how, and this is pretty, this is an extreme example, so I'm just gonna like just preface that so I don't want to upset anybody. But he was telling me that his parents beat him like severely. They would tie him down and beat him. And so what he did was he was able to detach himself mentally so that he couldn't feel the pain being inflicted. And so now what happens is when he feels like someone's going to betray him or violate trust, it makes him think immediately about his parents. So that's the thought. And the trigger is that he immediately detaches himself from that person. He'll just cut you off. He told me that people don't even realize that they've offended him because he just won't call them back and he just kind of disappears. And the result is that he has these fragmented relationships and he really doesn't want to have very few friends, and he wants to know how can he fix it. So he's an example of someone who has been working on self-esteem for quite a while with another therapist before he came on board with me, and he had the insight to be able to connect those dots. I just asked the right questions. I used my words as an instrument, but he was able to put that together. One more example I'll give you is that I have a client who she, as far as the trigger would be, she has a special needs brother who lives with her, and he is like in his 40s or 50s. So he's a well-grown person. And so her trigger is, well, that's the trigger. And the behavior is that she has been smoking a lot more than usual. And she wants to stop smoking, but it's gotten worse. The result is she's got some medical issues, and the doctors have asked her to stop smoking. And then financially, she's strapped. And we calculated how much she smokes, and she spends over $200 a month on cigarettes. So if she could break this habit and this cycle, it's going to help her with her health for sure, and then give her more money. So we looked at, and we have been working on self-esteem with her, by the way, but we looked at the triggers and the behavior, and she was able to identify that what really is going on is that she promised her mother before she passed away that she would take care of her brother and that she would not put him in an adult foster care home, an AFC home. She promised, but sometimes it's so taxing on her that she really is in conflict over what she should do. So she starts smoking. So she was able to at least pinpoint that. And so now we're just kind of working through some of those topics. And when she's strong enough, hopefully she'll be able to cut back on the smoking of the cigarettes. So that is the presentation. One quick thing I will say, I have 3 success stories that I want to share briefly. One is that I have a client who she started writing a book, but she was at a standstill, but working on the self-esteem and helping to increase it and gain awareness of what she was actually doing to sabotage some things in her life. Now she feels like she can pick that book up and start writing again. I have another client who decided to write a book, and so she's pursuing that as well. And I have another client who recently started an LLC, a limited liability company. And so I'm kind of helping her think that through and look at some of the aspects of starting a business in addition to the therapy. So when we address self-esteem, the sky is the limit. And when we take the fear away for people and they learn how to perceive themselves in a healthy manner and free from externals, but knowing that their worth never changes, their value may go up and down, but they're just as good as anyone else. It really gives them the motivation to try and be the best that they can. So thank you very much. I have enjoyed presenting this afternoon.
Thank you, Kendra. So we do have some time for questions now, about 10 minutes. So please feel free to either raise your hand in the reaction tab or put your questions into the chat box. The first question, Kendra, is around what is your experience, or do you have any experience with any relationship between self-esteem and geographic location, or self-esteem and kind of culture? Have you noticed differences between culture and self-esteem?
You know what? I really haven't. And I'll say predominantly I work in the city of Detroit. So I would just have to preface my answer with that. And not that that really has anything to do with it, but I haven't really noticed it changing across cultural lines or geographic locations. I think it has a lot to do with people's experiences. And so the fact that they're coming to me for therapy really is an indication that they really are suffering from depression, anxiety, and that usually that to me, that's a trigger or a cue that lets me know that the self-esteem has been compromised at some point.
Great, thank you. Another question, since COVID, folks have had to be much more visible on meetings like this one, for instance. So I'm wondering if you've had any experience where self-esteem and having to kind of view yourself daily or multiple times daily has come up in your practice, and how folks are dealing with self-esteem issues in our new kind of virtual spaces.
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I will say that, so I work in a couple of different places. One, I work for a community mental health setting. So a lot of my clients are not on Zoom, I will say that. So that has not really been an issue, but I have a few clients who have the capability to see me in person virtually, and they choose to be on the phone. So I do think that does play a role. I would say personally for myself, I know that when the pandemic first struck us here, I would always like mute myself and also the camera. I would never let anyone see me. But I have become used to being seen. And I just did what I needed to do, right? So I started fixing my hair, putting more makeup on, just because I know that people are visual and that helps me to feel good about myself. So I don't know if I really answered the question, but just I think it's more personal than my clients because I really haven't experienced it with my clients. But it has, I think, in this culture, because aesthetically, everyone is like looking at you. It just challenges you to be the best that you can. And I don't just mean like putting on makeup just to look cute or anything like that. I mean, really looking at my worth and looking at other people and saying, well, they're no different from me. And so just investing in myself and being the best that I can.
Right. I know personally, I did photography as a side gig for a while, and so many people have issues with photos of themselves, right? Or being in photos, and a lot of that's tied to self-esteem or self-image issues. And one of the things I would prep people have, if that's like an uncomfortable situation, is, take a selfie of yourself every day and make sure that there are some like full body, full figure pictures in there, right? And so start to know what you look like regularly. And so when you see a picture of yourself, that isn't like a surprise, right? And start to acknowledge one positive thing you like about how you look every day. And so, when you are in those situations where you may find yourself in a photograph, you're not automatically looking at the negative thing, right? And so you can learn to kind of self-identify those positive pieces.
Oh, I like that. That's good.
Yeah, because a lot of it, I do find even in my own family, it's like people hate being in photos, and it's like, I want you in my photos with me. Like, let's find a way to like build that in so you're more comfortable doing that. Even if we have to have a Snapchat filter of you with cat ears, right? It's like maybe that's the way to build it in, make it a little bit more playful until folks are more comfortable. Another question that came through from Melissa is, what do you do when a person will continue to maintain negative thoughts but is unwilling to change behavior to get other results for themselves? An example, I hate my job, I'm broke, but is unwilling to look at ways to acquire new skills.
Yeah, that's a good question. I typically find that people in that category, they usually just stop coming to therapy. But if I find that someone is resistant, we learned in therapy, not therapy school, but social work school, is that you start where the client's at. So maybe I'm starting too high, so I'll just come alongside them and we'll talk about whatever it is. And for some clients, it just means maybe for the first several sessions, I'm just listening to them vent and just being that support. And then the more they trust me and we build that rapport, then I'm able to throw a nugget in here, a nugget in there, so it doesn't sound like I'm preaching to them or like I'm judging them, but just trying to help them see life in a different manner, or see a different way of looking at it. And so I just kind of proceed cautiously, but I'm not scared, because I will challenge clients as I feel more comfortable, because they need to be challenged in a good way.
Great, thank you. A question from Ken. What have you noticed as the relationship between self-esteem and burnout?
That's a good question. I don't know if I really have directly experienced that with my clients, but with me, yeah, that's a good question, Ken. uh, yeah, when I find myself, when things start becoming monotonous, I start looking at, okay, what's going on? And usually it's because I'm either not communicating assertively, or I don't have those healthy boundaries in place. Either I'm taking on too many projects, more than what I need to, or I'm not speaking up and saying, no, I can't do this, I can't do that. So I do a lot of self-reflection and meditating. And so that's when I say, you know what, I'll put a halt to a lot of things and just start reassessing, because sometimes we start losing ourselves and what our goals are and what we're thinking, and we start appeasing people or being what we think people need, but we start abandoning or betraying ourselves. So that's what I try to do, is just really go into a self-reflection mode, and then come back out fighting and trying something new.
I think self-reflection is always a good tool for us to use in our practice, regardless of what we're doing.